nor does the Supreme Lord assume anyone's sinful or pious activities. Embodied beings, however, are bewildered because of the ignorance which covers their real knowledge. So Prabhupada's purport: the Sanskrit word vibhu means the Supreme Lord who is full of unlimited knowledge, riches, strength, fame, beauty, and renunciation. He is always satisfied in himself, undisturbed by sinful or pious activities. He does not create... It's interesting because pious activities also disturb us because we have to accept the material rewards. He does not create a particular situation for any living entity, but the living entity, bewildered by ignorance, desires to be put into certain conditions of life, and thereby his chain of action and reaction begins. A living entity is by superior nature full of knowledge. Nevertheless, he is prone to be influenced by ignorance due to his limited power. The Lord is omnipotent, but the living entity is not. The Lord is vibhu, or omniscient, but the living entity is anu, or atomic. Because he is a living soul, he has the capacity to desire by his free will. Such desire is fulfilled only by the omnipotent Lord. And so when the living entity is bewildered in his desires, the Lord allows him to fulfill those desires, but the Lord is never responsible for the actions and reactions of the particular situation which may be desired. Being in a bewildered condition, therefore, the embodied soul identifies himself with the circumstantial material body and becomes subjected to the temporary misery and happiness of life. We actually have two classes going on here simultaneously. It's modern technology. The Lord is the constant companion of the living entity as Paramatma, or the Supersoul, and therefore he can understand the desires of the individual soul as one can smell the flavor of a flower by being near it. Desire is a subtle form of conditioning for the living entity. Because if we desire something, that influences our behavior, our mental condition, and really the course of our life. If our desires become strong, we can veer off onto a different path in life, and this can be good or bad. One may develop spiritual desires or material desires, but ultimately, in this material world, we are not the body, but we do have free will, and we exercise that free will by choosing different objects, people, things, and our choices, of course, determine our future, our destiny. So the Lord fulfills the soul's desire as he deserves. Man proposes and God disposes. The individual is not, therefore, omnipotent in fulfilling his desires. The Lord, however, can fulfill all desires, and the Lord, being neutral to everyone, does not interfere with the desires of the minute, independent living entities. However, when one desires Krishna, the Lord takes special care and encourages one to desire in such a way that one can attain to him and be eternally happy. The Vedic hymns therefore declare, Esha Uhyeva sadhu karma karyati tang jang ebhyo lokebhyo uninishate. Esha eva sadhu karma karyati jang adho ninishate. The Lord engages the living entity in pious activities so that he may be elevated. The Lord engages him in impious activities so that he may go down, or as Prabhupada says here, to hell. Agyo jantura nisho yang atmanak sukadukayo ishvara prerito gachet sargam vasu abram evacha. The living entity is completely dependent in his distress and happiness. By the will of the Supreme, he can go to heaven or hell as a cloud is driven by the air. Therefore, the embodied soul, by his immemorial, which means beyond memory, by his immemorial desire to avoid Krishna consciousness, causes his own bewilderment. Consequently, although he is constitutionally eternal, blissful, and cognizant, due to the littleness of his existence, he forgets his constitutional position of service to the Lord and is thus entrapped by nescience. And under the spell of ignorance, the living entity claims that the Lord is responsible for his conditional existence. The Vedanta Sutras also confirm this by Shamya Nayagrinye na Sapekshata Tatahi Darshyati. The Lord neither hates nor likes anyone, though he appears to. Thank you. Actually, Krishna likes everyone, but the idea is he doesn't favor anyone unfairly. That's the idea here. So, Prabhupada ki jai. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Samaniti Namine Namaste Sarasate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. So we'll take a look at this verse, Nadate Kastyachit Papam. Here Krishna is speaking in the third person about himself, which is something which we also do. Like, for example, a father or mother can say, your mother, Jai. For example, if one talks back to one's mother, the mother may say, you cannot speak to your mother that way. So she's speaking about herself, but in the third person. So here Krishna says, Nadate kasyachit papam, that the Lord does not accept the sin of anyone. That's literally what it says. Nadate kasyachit nachaiva, nor indeed does the Almighty accept sukritam, their good deed. So here Krishna is called Vibhu. It's an interesting word. Prabhupada translates it here in the synonyms as the Supreme Lord. Bhu in Sanskrit means existence. It's the verb to be. In fact, the letter B in the English word be comes from that Sanskrit bhavati. So Bhu therefore means existence, and V has the sense of expansion. It can mean separation, as in Vyasa. Vyasa is called, it's actually a title, he's called Vyasa because he divided the Vedas, so that's Vyasa, literally putting apart or placing apart. So that's V. V is the opposite in Sanskrit of Sam. Sam means together, like Sankirtan. Together Kirtan. And by the way, we still have the prefix Sam in English, you may be delighted to know. The English prefix Sam came through the Greek and underwent a slight spelling change. In Greek, it was pronounced sun instead of sam, and that was spelled S-Y-N. That's where you get the S-Y-N as in synthesis, symbiotic, synthetic, etc., etc. The S-Y-N is just the Sanskrit sam from Sankirtan. And so sang means together, and the opposite of sam is vi, which means apart, like in Italian, via, which means away, via. So vibhu, so vi can mean away in the sense of a deviation, like going off the point, as in the word vikarma, which means bad karma, or bad actions can be called vikarma. So vi can have the sense of deviation, separating the sense of deviation, going off the path. It can also have the sense of dividing in the sense of expansion. And that's how it's used here, because when things divide, it can also be in the positive sense of expanding. And so it's used in that sense here. So vibhu literally means expansive existence, or the Supreme Lord whose existence expands everywhere. So, and a similar word to vibhu, in chapter 7 and 10 of the Bhagavad-gita, when Krishna identifies himself with all the greatest objects of this world, all these opulences are in Sanskrit, the word that is translated opulence is vibhuti. Vibhuti. In fact, that chapter 10 is called the Vibhuti Yoga chapter. So just like bhuti also is from the same root, it means existence. So vibhuti literally means the expansion of Krishna's glory. Krishna is a person, and he expands his power and his opulence into the creation, and therefore the great things of this creation are called vibhutis. Anyway, at no extra cost to you, explain some of the grammar there. So it said here, Vibhu, the Supreme Lord, does not accept, literally doesn't take on, so to speak. Adate, does not take on, does not accept anyone's sin, nor indeed anyone's good deed. Can't resist. Su in Sanskrit means good. Sukrita means good deed, and we have both those words in English still. You may be interested to know. I mean the prefix su and kritam. From the Sanskrit root kri, which means to do or make, like krita here, we have English words like create. And the word su, again, through the Greek, has become the English eu, as in euphonics, which means good sound, or eugenics, good breeding, or and so on. So that English prefix eu, which means good, is Sanskrit su, same word. Anyway, so then Krishna says, ajnanena, there's other words here, I could tell you how they still exist in English. Well, I'll tell you one. Jnana. Jnana became the Greek gnosis, which means knowledge, and so one who doesn't know is called agnostic, which just means ajnani. So anyway, Krishna says here, ajnanena abritam jnanam, which is really, it's almost like a tautology. In other words, a word which says something which is obviously true. Like if you say, for example, a square has four 90-degree interior angles and 4 equal sides, but that's what a square means. So it's just, in a sense, you're just saying the same thing in a different way. So in the same way, Krishna says here, it's really interesting. He says that jnanam, or knowledge, is covered by unknowledge. I mean, we translate ajnanam as ignorance, but in Sanskrit it's just ajnana, unknowledge, or ignorance. And so Krishna says knowledge, well, I guess that's all that was missing is a phone ring. So knowledge is covered by unknowledge. And by the way, this word abritam is also important in Bhagavad-gita because Krishna says, there's a very important verse in chapter 13 where Krishna says, Prakriting purusham chaiva vidyanadi ubhavapi, that both nature, material nature, physical nature, both material nature and the soul are beginningless. But the difference is that vikarang cha gunang chaiva vidhi prakriti sambhavan, that prakriti, or nature, undergoes transformations, vikara, and guna, different qualities. So, whereas the soul, so nature, like for example, this microphone used to be something else. I mean, it could have been part of, I don't know, Genghis Khan's beard or something, because it's just the nature of material things. They just, they're disintegrating, and then all the molecules just kind of float around the planet, and they appear in other places. And so that's called vikara. Material things are constantly in a state of transformation, and as they transform, they take on different qualities. However, the soul is different. The soul actually eternally has the same quality, and the soul is never transformed into something else. However, the word Krishna uses here and elsewhere is that the soul is covered. The soul is covered. So, I mean, if you imagine a light, and if you put a lampshade on it, it may look nice, but you get a little less light. And then if you wrap the light bulb in cloth, you get less light. And so the more you cover the light, the less light you get. And so we get different kinds of bodies. And even in this particular body, the more we engage in sinful activities, or the more we just engage in ignorant activities, the thicker the covering. And then if you look at, for example, an animal, it's the same soul. It's like, the old example you probably heard a million times, or maybe slightly less times. The traffic light is red, yellow, and green. So actually, it's all the same light. But when the light passes through a red covering, it comes out red, or yellow, or green. But behind those screens, behind those coverings, it's all the same light. And so the same soul is there in every body. I mean, not literally the same soul, but the same kind of soul, the same quality of soul, the same powers. But when the soul, for example, came through your baby's body, you experience baby consciousness. And when And when your consciousness came through a child's body, you experienced child consciousness. Or one experiences a male consciousness or female consciousness or, I don't know, Kiwi consciousness or, whatever. Or, we experience the consciousness. So it's all the same consciousness. But as it passes through the covering of a body, it takes on the quality of that covering, just as white light becomes manifests as red light when it passes through that filter of a red screen, or red glass, or plastic. So the soul is never actually changed. You're always yourself. You're eternally yourself. However, our true self-understanding is covered by ignorance. By ignorance. And the body is ignorance. Just in the simple sense, the body's not conscious. The word in Sanskrit is ajnana. We translate it as ignorance, but really jnana. Jnana in Sanskrit can simply mean awareness or consciousness. So in a sense, consciousness is covered by unconsciousness, because the body is not conscious. I hope this won't come as a blow to anybody, but the body is not conscious. We are conscious of the body. And so if I identify with my body, I'm literally placing unconsciousness, namely just a physical body, I'm placing unconsciousness over consciousness, and that's the problem Krishna describes here. And so Krishna says tena, which means by that, meaning by that unconsciousness, that ignorance, muhyanti jantava. Living beings are bewildered, confused. So, this first statement that Krishna makes is very significant. Nadate kasyachit papam, that the Lord does not accept anyone's sin or indeed anyone's good deed. So, we have a term that we use a lot among anyway, I was going to make a joke, I won't make that. Among the devotees. I was going to say Prabhus and Matajis, which is, anyway. Actually everyone is just a Vaishnava. So, anyway, a term which is causeless mercy. You've all heard that, right? Raise your hand if you haven't heard that thousands of times. So, what's interesting there's two things that are interesting about the term causeless mercy, but which, by the way, I'm not attacking. Two interesting things is, number one, it's not found in Shastra. It's actually not in any of our scriptures, that exact Sanskrit term, causeless mercy. And number two, it's a type of redundancy. Because if you think of it, mercy is always in tension with justice. Justice means you just get what you deserve. Okay, you broke the law, you did this, into the slammer, as they say, for so many. So justice means you just get what you deserve, quid pro quo, nothing to talk about, don't cry in front of me, this is what you get. And mercy means that despite the fact that technically you deserve this punishment, out of compassion, someone is maybe going to lighten your load. And so if a judge, for example, gives a reduced sentence because the judge was bribed, as they say, a good lawyer knows the law. A great lawyer knows the judge. So anyway, if the judge gives you a reduced sentence because the judge was bribed or because the judge is your, cousin, that's not mercy. That's just cronyism or corruption. So the word mercy means that you don't have another motive. You're just doing it out of mercy. If you have another motive, it's not mercy. It's just the pretense of mercy. So the word mercy already means it's not just justice, it's mercy. And so when we say causeless mercy, why do we say causeless mercy? I believe because, to be emphatic, it's a type of didactic emphasis or repetition to make it clear that the mercy is really without any ulterior motive. The problem is that as a hermeneutic principle, hermeneutics means rational interpretation. Rational interpretation. When we study our scriptures or learn from our acharyas, and then, how do we understand it? When are they speaking ecstatically and not literally? For example, let's say a great acharya says, I'm the most fallen. That's technically not true. Great devotees are not fallen, but out of ecstatic humility they may say that. And so we understand that statement is not to be taken literally. It's simply what I call ecstatic speech, which is not to be taken literally. And it can also be compared to, for example, Yashoda insisting that she's Krishna's mother, when in fact Krishna is Adi Purusha, the original person. So he's really no one's child, but in ecstatic rasa, he becomes someone's child. So causeless mercy, so when someone says that I absolutely did not deserve to be a devotee, I deserve to be born as a handicapped cockroach in a meat eater's garbage can or something. Devotees sometimes exercise great creativity in expressing how bad a birth they really deserve to have. So, if a devotee says that there's nothing I did to deserve this, that is also ecstatic speech. It's not literally true. Because if it were literally true, quite a number of verses in the Bhagavad-gita would turn out to be wrong. And since we accept all the verses of the Gita as right and not wrong, when we have a concept or a phrase or a term like causeless mercy, what we need to do, according to the principles Prabhupada taught, is see how that statement, such as I don't deserve to be a devotee, or we're all fallen, how is that statement compatible with what Krishna teaches? For example, Krishna says in the Bhagavad-gita, Jejata mam prapadyante, as everyone literally approaches me, prapadyante, tam, them, tataiva, exactly in proportion, bhajamyaham, I reciprocate. So Krishna not only says that he reciprocates with us, with everyone, not only devotees, with everyone, but he says that he does so precisely. So if someone is sinful and yet gets special causeless mercy, that would not be a precise reciprocation. And also it would actually contradict another statement from Krishna, which is samohang sarva bhuteshu. I am equal to all living beings. Na me dveshosti. I don't hate anybody. Na me priya. I don't favor anybody. In other words, Krishna is a good parent. So, if someone says, I have no qualification to be a devotee, again, if you're just speaking ecstatically, we can applaud you. But if you actually think you're speaking philosophy, then we have to correct you. Because if it were the case that you are totally undeserving, but you became a devotee, then that sounds very nice, like Krishna is so merciful, the devotees are so merciful. Unfortunately, there's a very dark side to that statement, which is the logical corollary, which is that there's millions and millions, who knows how many living entities who are equally undeserving, but they're actually going down. They're not going up like you. And so it would turn out to be the case that Krishna is not equal to everyone, even though he says he is. It would turn out to be the case that Krishna does not precisely reciprocate with everyone, even though he says he does, etc., etc. Or, for example, Krishna says, Pandita Samadarshana, the wise see everyone equally. So is Krishna wise or unwise? If Krishna is wise, obviously, he's wise, he's the wisest. that means he sees everyone equally. So we really need to pay attention, actually, to what a real philosophy is. And one of the reasons this is important, this is an important point, is because this movement exists for two purposes. To facilitate the members in their spiritual journey back to Krishna, and to try to attract and persuade other people to make the journey with us. So it's really important that we understand how and why people actually join the Hare Krishna movement. Because if we do understand it, there's a chance we may actually convince someone. Now, if someone believes against many statements of Krishna, that some people totally undeserving just become devotees because someone, someone just gave them mercy, causeless mercy, then we may think that it can happen to other people. So let's go out and give causeless mercy to other people. So what's the problem there? The problem is that it's first of all, it's not the way Krishna describes the process of joining the Hare Krishna movement. And so I'd like to give you Krishna's version of it. And as they say, don't kill the messenger. So Arjuna began an interesting conversation. Arjuna begins this topic of how do people come to Krishna consciousness? In chapter 6 of the Gita, text 37, when he says, Arjuna Vacha, ayati, which Prabhupada translates the unsuccessful transcendentalist. So yati, the word yati can mean a sage. It literally means one who is practicing spiritual life. The Sanskrit verb yat means to endeavor, to try. And so yati is one who is endeavoring and trying, and in a disciplined way, because yati can also, of course, from the verb yam, from which you get the yoga principles of yama niyama, it can mean one who is disciplining themselves. And so ayati means someone who fell down from their discipline, who fell down from their spiritual practice, who gave up their attempt to be Krishna conscious. So, everyone please turn off your phones, or we'll pass around a bucket of water and you can just place your phone in the water. So Arjuna's question is ayati, which literally means one who fell from their attempt to be Krishna conscious. But, Arjuna says, it's ayati, but shraddhayo peto, but the person really believes in Krishna. Shraddha, as I've often explained, shraddha is all translated faith. Prabhupada translates it here, shraddha, with faith. But the word shraddha does not mean to merely believe that God exists or Krishna exists. There's a different word for that in Sanskrit, which is astikyam. The English word, the Sanskrit word asti means he exists, or she exists, or it exists. And it's from the Sanskrit asti that we have the English word is, and the German ist, and the Spanish es, etc., etc., etc. That's all Sanskrit us and asti. So from the word asti, which means he exists, you get the word astikyam, which means believing that God exists. And that's one of the qualities of brahmanas, astikyam. So merely do you believe in God, that's not the word shraddha, that's the word astikyam. But shraddha is actually an action noun, so to speak, because da in Sanskrit means to place, and shrad, to place shraddha, which means to really place your trust. So shraddha is not merely believing something, it's a dynamic action in which you put your trust in Krishna actively in every situation. So Arjuna, he sets up kind of like this paradox or simply this complex situation, because someone did fall down from their spiritual attempt, but that person really believes in Krishna, really trusts him. their Shraddha. And so Arjuna says, Yoga Chalita Manasa. But the person's mind, Manasa, was Chalita, was kind of moved, literally moved, in the sense of deviated from yoga. Aprapya yoga samsiddhim, not achieving the ultimate perfection of spiritual life. Aprapya, not achieving, not reaching. Aprapya yoga samsiddhim, kangatim Krishna gacchati. Krishna, that person goes to what destination? Where does that person go? So that's how Arjuna introduces the topic. And of course, the answer is going to be very much related to how people join the Hare Krishna movement. So, what does Krishna say? Oh, then Arjuna says, Etan me sangshayam Krishna. I'm giving you a very, very literal translation, which I enjoy doing, being a Western sort of square academic. So, Etan me sangshayam Krishna. This is my doubt, Krishna. This is my doubt, Krishna, literally. Chetum arhasya shechit, and you should remove it entirely. Actually, in English, you remove a doubt. In Sanskrit, you cut a doubt. You cut off a doubt, chetum. So you should cut this doubt completely, asheshata. Tvaranya, besides you, samshayasyasya, of this doubt, besides you, of this doubt, cheta nahupapadyate, the cutter is not to be found. Or in other words, the remover. It sounds good in Sanskrit. I mean, if you have a problem, it's because you're stuck in English. Anyway, so Arjuna says, besides you, tvaranyat, the remover of this doubt is not to be found. So what does Krishna say? What does Krishna respond? How does Krishna respond? Sri Bhagavan Uvacha, Parata, Arjuna, Naiveha namutra vinashas tasya vidyate. So the first thing Krishna tells Arjuna is, relax. Because na eva iha, which literally means not indeed in this life, na mutra, nor in the next life, vinasyas tasya vidyate, does that person perish. That person is not lost in this life or the next life. It's the first thing he says. So relax. And then Krishna says, Nahi kalyana krit kaschit durgating tata gachati. Because one who does good certainly never will go to a bad destination. This is very nice, very comforting. That's what Krishna says. But he has more to say. It's interesting because Arjuna just said, aprapya yoga samsiddhim, not reaching the ultimate perfection of yoga. But here Krishna says, but that fallen spiritualist does reach somewhere. He's not nowhere. And he says, prapya punya kritang lokang. There's one verse I thought. Oh, I left out a verse, sorry. Don't sue me. Of course, well, actually, you're not American, so you won't sue me. Anyway, when Arjuna said what destinations that person go to, I skipped a verse. It says, because he's speculating, he says, he expresses his fear. He says, kachin, which in this case means like, isn't it the case, or isn't it possible? Kachin nobody of says that literally being lost in both. In other words, a person kind of damaged their material career by becoming a transcendentalist. You've all seen cases of that. And also didn't make it spiritually. So kacha nobayavi brashtas chinabrami vanashati. Like a rent cloud, like a torn cloud, the person simply perishes. Apratishto, having no standing, literally. Having no standing, Mahabaho, Almighty Armed Krishna, vimulto, bewildered, brahmanakpati, on the spiritual path. No standing. He's lost. And so that's why Krishna says, the first thing Krishna says, is that Partha, that person is not lost. Not in this life, not in the next life. That person is not lost because no one who does good ever will go to an evil, a bad destination. So Krishna immediately reassures Arjuna, but now he's going to get into some more of the details. So, okay, the person is not lost, doesn't perish, doesn't go to some horrible place, so where does that person go? And then Krishna says, Prapya, because Arjuna said aprapya, not reaching the highest perfection of yoga, but the person goes somewhere. So prapya punya kritang lokan, reaching the worlds of those who act piously. Reaching the worlds of those who act piously. Ushitwa, and dwelling there. Shashvati sama, literally it means endless years, but it's not endless, as you'll see in the next line. But it just means people talk that way even in English. Like, for example, wow, I could stay here forever. Or I feel like I've been here forever. Or something like that. Or I feel like I've known you forever, even though we just met. So, you see, sannyasis are romantic. So, just kidding. Anyway, prapya punya katang lokan. So achieving the worlds of those who act piously and dwelling there for just a huge number of years. Suchinam srimatang gehe yoga brashto bijayate. The yoga brashta, the one who slipped, that fell from yoga, from spiritual life, takes birth directly. Gehe, geha in Sanskrit is griha, just another way of saying griha, geha. In the home, gehe, in the home of those who are suchinam, you could say clean, but it means like very decent, very, very decent, good, clean-cut people, so to speak. And srimatang, those who, live comfortably. And of course, Prabhupada explains, because there are advantages. You have leisure time and you can pursue your interests rather than just, working to fend off starvation. So, that's what happens to the fallen transcendentalist. But, atava, or else, indeed, atava, yoginam eva, kule bhavati dhimatang. Or, even better, the person takes birth in the community or in the home, kula, like Guru Kula means the Guru's home or the Guru's community. So kule, in the community of those who are yogis, in other words, spiritual practitioners, and who are wise. Wise, dhimatang, di means intelligent. Anyway, we'll go into all the grammar. So dhimatang, in wise transcendentalists, wise spiritual practitioners. And then Krishna says, etadhi durlabhatarang. That indeed is very hard to achieve. Etadhi durlabhatarang loke, in this world, janma jaridrisham, such a birth. It is very hard to achieve such a birth in this world. So those who are born to devotees have a very rare and extraordinary birth. So then, now we get to the point. And of course, yoginam eva can mean those who take birth in the family of devotees, or it can be simply those who in some ways are religious, those who have some sense of connecting to God. I wasn't born in a Vaishnava family, but I was given religious education, and I did experience God in my youth. I absolutely experienced, I didn't know God was Krishna, but I did experience God in my youth. And so I'm very grateful for that, and I'm very grateful for the good parents I had. So then Krishna says, tatra. Tatra means therein, in that situation where one has taken such a good birth. And of course, a tatra, grammatically, may also refer to the previous verse. In other words, either there taking birth among good religious or spiritual people who have some wisdom, or simply taking birth in suchinang srimatang gehe, in the home of those who are very decent people and who have material facilities. So in that situation, tang buddhi sangyogam labate purvadehikam, a person regains the sangyoga, the connection with spiritual intelligence, which is Purvadehikam. Purvade, which is from the word purva, deha. Purva we have in English, previous, same word. So Purva Dehika means from their previous body. In other words, when you understand that there is a God, or God is important, or I should pay attention to my relationship with God in some way, what Krishna, and you kind of got that in your youth, you grew up in a good family, what Krishna says here is that is, you are reconnecting with a spiritual intelligence that is from your previous body. In other words, it's not a Gyata Sukriti. It's not that you were just lower than a worm in rotten cabbage or something. It's you are actually reviving your spiritual understanding from your past body. Because remember that Krishna is talking about those who practiced Krishna consciousness in the past and simply could not continue their spiritual practice. And Krishna says, Jetate cha tato bhuya. The person then, thereupon the person endeavors further, sangsidhau, toward the ultimate perfection, Kurunandana or Arjuna. What's very interesting here, because if you really pay attention to the Sanskrit, Krishna is actually building a very powerful case, and you have to pay close attention to the Sanskrit words he's using. Because here he says, Jetate cha tato bhuya. The person thereupon endeavors further. But the word endeavors is yetate, which is the same word that Arjuna used to begin this whole discussion. Ayati. The one who fell from their attempt, their endeavor, their spiritual attempt. And so here Krishna says, okay, the person gave up their endeavor, but now they're endeavoring again. They're back on track. They're endeavoring again. And it's because, and they regain the understanding from their previous body. And then Krishna emphasizes that we have something to do with the fact that we come to Krishna consciousness. Krishna then says, he used the same word, purva, which he used in the previous verse, purva, which is a form of purva. So purvabhyasena, abhyasa in the Bhagavad-gita is the word which in later Sanskrit, like in Lord Chaitanya's time, the word sadhana, or practice, spiritual practice, sadhana. In the Gita, the word is abhyasa. It means sadhana. So whenever you see the word abhyasa in the Bhagavad-gita, it means sadhana. So here Krishna says that purvabhyasena, by previous practice. In other words, by previous sadhana, meaning in your past life. By previous practice, and then Krishna says, Tenaiva, by that alone. You know, read it and weep. Purvabhyasena, by previous practice, by that alone. Hriyate hyavashopisa, a person is literally just kind of like taken by Krishna consciousness, avasha, practically involuntarily. Jigyasurapi, we all, all of us woke up one morning like, oh my God, I'm in a Hare Krishna temple. So, don't know if Krishna's explaining that here. So, Krishna says, Jigyasur, the person wants to know about spiritual life. I mean, think of yourself. Of course, some people like Megan were, had a certain advantage from early childhood, but the person, think of your own life when you came into contact with Krishna consciousness, that you wanted to know about spiritual life. And that's what Krishna says here. Jigyasurapi yogasya shabda brahmati vartate, and that person goes beyond the Shabda Brahma, just the ordinary scriptures. Like people may have been shocked, like, what, you're joining the Hare Krishna movement? What about, your family's religion? Or what about this? Or what about that? Or you're a Hindu? Or whatever. And that's what Krishna's talking about. That when you really discover Krishna, you understand that this is actually beyond just ordinary earthly religion. This is something on a different level. So that's what Krishna is talking about. Now, what's interesting here is that many of us perhaps had the experience of just kind of being carried away, like you come into contact with devotees or chanting or Prabhupada's books, and you're just kind of like carried away by it. And the word avasha, vasha means control in Sanskrit. Like, for example, in the Gita, when Krishna says one whose senses are under control, he says vashehi jasyendriyani, one whose senses are under control. So avasha is a common sort of adverbial noun in Sanskrit, which means something like involuntarily. In other words, without your control. And so those who have this experience, that they're hriyate, just like Prabhupada said, the word hari means one who takes away our sin from the Sanskrit verb her. So harati or hari takes away. This is the passive form of the same verb. So like, for example, I take is the active form of the verb. I am taken is the passive form of the verb. Or I see, I am seen. So this is the passive form of the verb, which means one is taken in the sense of one is kind of like carried away. Avasha, involuntarily, without, beyond their control. So that experience, which ironically corresponds to what we call agyata sukriti, unknown good deed. In other words, we go on Harinam and people don't know what hit them, or they don't really understand, or we sell them a book, they don't really understand what the book is, they may not read it, but somehow we're like infecting them with Krishna consciousness, and then avasha, almost like beyond their control, they'll just be carried into the Hare Krishna movement, which doesn't happen a lot nowadays. Anyway, what's interesting here is that specific experience, where just almost like beyond your control, you're just sort of carried into Krishna consciousness, only applies to people who, in their past life, in their past body, as Krishna says, were practicing Krishna consciousness. And that is, in my view, because what I'm trying to do is what Prabhupada told me to do. Prabhupada actually ordered me to do this. Prabhupada, when I was a grihasta, See that? Solidarity. Anyway, so when I was a grihasta temple president, I was 22 years old, very mature. That was a joke. And I was temple president in Gainesville, Florida. And Prabhupada wrote me a letter in which we were discussing different things. And he wrote me a letter saying that devotees don't engage in mental speculation, but they can engage in philosophical speculation. And then he explained the difference, using a kind of jargon. The difference, he gave the example that Krishna says in the Bhagavad-gita, Rasoham apsu konteya, I am the taste in water. Now, Prabhupada said, if you speculate, is this true or not? That's mental speculation. However, if you speculate, okay, I accept what Krishna said, what the heck does that mean? What does it mean that Krishna is a taste in water? And you try to figure that out. That, Prabhupada said, is philosophical speculation, and he invited me to do that. So I accept the principle of agyata sukriti because it's given by the acharyas. However, I am using my God-given, acharya-given right to try to figure out what does that mean. Because I have to balance these things. On the one hand, Krishna clearly says over and over again in the Gita that he's equal to everyone. He does not favor anyone. So if one unqualified person is saved and another unqualified person, takes birth in North Korea or something. Today I'm just bashing North Korea today. So anyway, I don't know, what did North Korea ever do to me? So if one person is saved, another person is not saved, then Krishna is not equal to everyone. But Krishna is equal to everyone. He says he is. And also, who in the world want to worship a supreme God who's like prejudiced or just like, why? How could you worship a God who's not even fair? That would be a real disappointment. So how do I reconcile that there is the concept of agyata sukriti, and yet Krishna says that when you're just sort of drawn to the Hare Krishna movement, almost beyond your control, it's not agyata sukriti, it's because of your previous Krishna consciousness. Because you did this before in your past life, you just didn't finish it. So how do we reconcile all these things? So in a way which is philosophically consistent. So this is how I see it. Agyata Sukriti exists, unknown good deed. Agyata Sukriti, unknown good deed. However, it applies to people especially who have previous practice. Because if in your past life you practice Krishna consciousness and you walk by a Harinam, Sankirtan, or you buy a book or you eat some prasadam, that will awaken your own previous practice where you earned it. And we have an example of this in the Bhagavatam. In fact, we have an example in the Bhagavatam precisely in the story, which is an example of Agyata Sukriti, of chanting the holy name, namely the example of Ajamila. Please don't say Ajamil, because it sounds like a Vedic breakfast cereal, When I wake up, I reach for Ajamil. Anyway, so it's not a Vedic breakfast cereal, it's actually Ajamila. Anyway, if you look at the story of Ajamila, he actually was a good devotee. He practiced Krishna consciousness, he became even advanced, and then he fell down. So when he was calling out Narayan, the name of his little child, it awakened his own Krishna consciousness from his previous practice, exactly as Krishna explains in the Bhagavad-gita. So here we have a perfect match between the Bhagavatam and the Bhagavad-gita. And what the story of Ajamila really illustrates is Krishna's statement in the Bhagavad-gita, Neha vikramanashosti, there's no loss or diminution. Pratyavayo navidyate. So now, that experience of just being drawn into Krishna consciousness, which we hope people will have just because we go out in Harinam or give them prasadam or sell them a book, they'll just be kind of like drawn to Krishna consciousness. It actually, according to the Bhagavad-gita, it applies to people with previous practice. What about people that don't have previous practice? Because there's a very large number of people out there who are not just being involuntarily drawn into the Hare Krishna movement. They seem to be remarkably resistant to Harinam Sankirtan, book distribution, and prasadam distribution. And so when I try to understand what Shastra is actually saying, and Prabhupada, by the way, himself said many times that these three sources of correct knowledge, Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra, the most important is Shastra. Prabhupada himself says that. The most important is Shastra. Shastra is the foundation. And the Acharyas explain Shastra, they don't contradict it. So, if people, and I think this applies to most people out there, even in the blessed islands of New Zealand, most people out there at the present time in the material world, in fact, do not have a significant background of practicing Krishna consciousness in a past life, and they are not just being drawn into the Hare Krishna movement as soon as we just go out and chant in the street or give them some prasadam. That's not happening. So what about them? We have to actually persuade them. We have to actually attract them. The idea that people will automatically join if we just, infect them with all this Krishna consciousness, even though they don't know what's going on. They have no idea what's happening to them. They think they're just walking by some Hare Krishnas singing and dancing in the street. Little do they know that we are infecting them with Krishna consciousness. I suggest that if we really want to spread this movement, it can't be done. We can't just manipulate people who don't know what's happening to them. We actually have to do the hard work and persuade people. We actually have to convince people. We actually have to not try all these unconscious tactics, like they don't even need to know what's happening to them. I think they actually do need to know. And if you look at Bhagavad-gita, what you find is that Krishna persuades Arjuna. He persuades Arjuna. So when we go out in Harinam, for example, whether the public thinks, we look strange or thinks we look normal, that actually matters. If we're thinking that, it doesn't matter. If the public thinks we're strange, that doesn't matter because we're just going to manipulate them. They don't even know, they don't need to know what's happening to them. So whatever they think about the Harinam is irrelevant. It doesn't matter what they think about us. because we are, unknown to them, manipulating them for their own good. And my humble suggestion, actually I'm not so humble, but anyway, my suggestion is that we give less attention to techniques which involve manipulating people who don't know what's happening, and actually pay more attention to actually persuading people who do know what's happening. And what that means is, if we do certain things in public and people think they're strange, that actually is going to damage our ability to spread this movement. Because you can't just say, well, it doesn't matter what people think because the sound went in their ear. Well, actually it does matter, because the overwhelming majority of those people out there in Harinam did not practice Krishna consciousness in their last life. And therefore, it's not just, all they need is a little Agata Sukriti trigger, and they'll just drift into the Hare Krishna movement, and they don't even know what's happening. No, that's not happening. So we can let it not happen for maybe 40 more years or 100 more years. But I suggest the sooner we realize that we need to actually persuade people, that people need to actually be conscious of what we're doing with them and not unconscious, I think the sooner we wake up to that, the quicker we'll get the Western Hare Krishna movement back on track. And I believe, to the best of my knowledge, that everything I've said here is consistent with Shastra. And I reject ideas in Krishna consciousness which are inconsistent with Shastra. Because Prabhupada said that Shastra is the ultimate authority. So anyway, I think I've browbeaten you enough. So, any questions on these points? Yes, Jai Shila. 2 for the price of 1.
Maybe it's a somewhat extreme example, and maybe there's many in between before we get to that. Jagai and Madai,
yes.
We understand we're Brahmins by birth, born in Brahmin.
Let me just repeat that for the people, because they always complain if I don't repeat the questions. So Jai Shila, my dear old friend, godbrother, is asking, what about Jagai and Madai, those two gentlemen?
It would appear that due to the quote-unquote causeless mercy of Nityananda Prabhu, created their good fortune.
So it appears that the causeless mercy of Nityananda Prabhu created their good fortune. Yes, okay.
So, just if you could say
that's fine, that's fine.
Words on that.
See if you can stump the Swami.
No, it's not to stump the Swami.
We should have, if I can't answer the question, I get dropped into a barrel of water or something. So, okay, so the case of Jagai and Madai is very interesting. First of all, this actually came up earlier today. Who asked it? Was it you? Did. There's the culprit. Yes. Actually, you asked the question this morning. And what I said was that, of course, as we know, Jagai and Madai are actually Jai Vijay. They're actually residents of Vaikuntha. And that I compared it, so that pastime is kind of like a Vaikuntha commercial. It's just like, for example, let's say I'll use different ones. Let's say a commercial for a restaurant. And so some beautiful woman and handsome man, they walk into a restaurant and they're received with great courtesy and please sit down. Oh, thank you. Oh, this food is so delicious. They're actually actors. It's a commercial. So, in a sense, Chaitanya Leela, it's like a series of divine commercials. In the sense that Jagai and Madai, commercials for going back to Godhead. Because Jagai and Madai, of course, are not ordinary conditioned souls. They're eternal associates of the Lord. And, but also, if you look at the actual pastime closely, what happened is that they, of course, offended Nityananda, and then Lord Chaitanya came and threatened them, and Nityananda intervened on their behalf, and they had genuine remorse. They felt genuine remorse. And they surrendered to the Lord really out of genuine remorse. They had They had a powerful change of heart. So they were conscious. In other words, they had a conscious conversion. It's not just that Nityananda came and kind of unknown to them was kind of like injecting them with, divine radiation, which, I guess, which changed their brains, then suddenly they wanted to be devotees. It was all conscious. Everything that happened in that pastime happened on the conscious, not the unconscious platform. And the reason that Lord Chaitanya arranged that particular pastime for our edification is to convey the message that even if you are very fallen, if you surrender, not if you just are subjected unconsciously to more and more spiritual radiation, because to get to work every day you have to walk by the Harinam party. But that if you consciously, out of your own free will, surrender to the Lord, your sins will be forgiven. So that was the point. Yes. Okay. The process of convincing or persuading people. Yeah. Okay, so we're all aware of the process of Agyapsukriti. What's the process of persuading people? You know how they always say if you don't use a muscle, it becomes really weak? So we don't use the persuasion muscle so much. It's interesting because I'll just give my view, and the worst that could happen to me is, there'll be a riot and I'll be killed. So I believe, just based on my observation, having been in the Hare Krishna movement for almost 50 years, and most of the time as a leader, that many devotees, or the movement in many places, has developed a dependence on an exotic, attention-grabbing appearance. And that there is real insecurity. Like, if we go out on the street and we look like everyone else, how can we ever get people's attention? Who will ever notice us? Now, in answer to that, I would say that there are religions in this world, in New Zealand, in other countries, that are growing among Western people much faster than we are, if we're growing at all. And they do not depend on an exotic, attention-grabbing appearance that kind of like screams out at you. And so this, remember the what was it? The wolf, three piggies. I'll huff and I'll puff and I'll blow your house down. That's kind of what we do. Like, we will chant, our kirtan will be so loud, we'll bang the kartals and the drums so loudly, we'll chant so loudly, we'll make temples so opulent, we'll make food so rich that we will huff and puff and blow your karmi house down. And I think we ought to consider the art of humble persuasion. For example, if we go out in public and we respect the cultural norms of the society we're in, then people reciprocate that respect. If it's a simple rule. If you want to be respected, respect others. So we need to learn. People like religious groups or spiritual groups that don't rely on a very exotic, unusual, loud, banging appearance, what do? And why aren't they having more luck than us? So I think we need to really, go back to school on this. Sure. Yes, Jayasila said that he has an experience of one very successful church in this country where they provide facilities, they provide support for families in various ways. Yes, an option from being isolated. Yeah, community. I mean, community. So, in other words, here's a simple question to ask, and this is not just for New Zealand, this is for every country. When people come to, let's say, a Hare Krishna temple, anywhere, let's talk about the Western world because that's what Prabhupada wanted me to focus on. When people come do they receive a reception which is better than the reception they'll receive at any other church or synagogue or mosque or not? What kind of reception do they get? How much are they made to feel welcome? And et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it is possible. It is possible, even in this very fallen age, to build a powerful spiritual movement. And we need to look at what people are doing because, if we're not doing that well among Western people in terms of really building a big, powerful movement, and other people are, maybe we need to pay attention and not just think that because of Agyata Sukriti, all we have to do is just show up. All we have to do is just show up. We don't have to be like other groups. We don't have to pay careful attention to what people think of our presentation. We don't have to pay any attention to, like, what did people think? Did they like it? Did they not like it? What didn't they like? What did they like? We don't have to do that because we just have to show up because we're the automatic winners. That's a great attitude. Run your business that way and see how many days it takes you to go bankrupt. So again, I think we need to pay much more attention to people. Not just treat them as kind of like philosophical categories. They are the conditioned souls. And we are going to go and just spray spiritual benedictions on them. They have no idea what's happening. They don't need to know. They're too stupid to know what's in their own good. Which is really do we really think people don't pick up on that? The fact that we think they're too stupid to know what's good for them, and so we're just going to do what's good for them, and who cares what they think about it, because we are manipulating them, and we will gain control of them by piling up the Agyata Sukriti, and therefore it's irrelevant what they think, it's irrelevant what their comfort zone is. We're just going to manipulate them right into their own salvation. And they don't need to know what's happening, because they're too stupid to do the right thing anyway. Great attitude. Great attitude. Any other questions? Yes.
How do we reconcile with the pastimes of Lord Chaitanya that he was traveling around the South Island and all his...
South Island? Wow. New Zealand's even more auspicious than I imagined. Well, first of all, if someone takes birth in India when Lord Chaitanya's there and just happens to be in a town that he's passing through, that doesn't happen automatically. You have to really be somebody spiritually to take part in Chaitanya Leela. He did, but don't forget, he was bringing people back to Krishna consciousness because, for example, South India, Lord Chaitanya mostly traveled in South India, and it's very well known that all the great Vaishnavacharyas, until Lord Chaitanya, appeared in South India. Ramanuja, Madhvacharya, the Alvars in Tamil Nadu, who were very significant devotees. So yes, he went to an area where there was a very powerful ancient Vaishnava tradition, and he chanted Hare Krishna. Now, with all due respect to New Zealand, I'm not aware that there's a powerful ancient Vaishnava tradition on these two islands. So, you know what they say, if everything else fails, read the instructions. And And so, anyway, we have to persuade people. Yes, you had a question? Oh, is there a microphone we could hand you?
I'm just asking this for my own clarification. Because of our generation, we look back to your generation and we see that we hear amazing stories about devotees. They went on Harinam. That was something that the devotees did regularly. And we hear how Srila Prabhupada started chanting, went on Harinam himself. So, excuse me, but it just sort of seems that you're kind of knocking Harinam about. I'm sorry, that's just my own feeling.
Yes.
So are you saying...
Yes. Okay, let me
no
repeat that
Harinam
question. What's your name?
Sumuki.
Sumuki said that in her generation, she's looking at my generation, although we're practically the same age. I'm just kidding. That was a joke. She's looking at my generation and how we did Harinam and Prabhupada did Harinam. So can we put that as a question? Am I knocking Harinam?
Sorry if that sounds rude. We
That's
also
all right.
see how Prabhupada, when he sent the 3 couples to England, how he told them to go on the street. Now, I totally appreciate and really understand what you're saying on the
Yes.
level of delivering the goods properly. I'm just trying for my own clarification to
Yes,
see
I understand.
what you're meaning.
Yeah, so I'll answer you. First of all, I've never said tonight, and I don't think I've ever said anywhere, anytime, that we should not chant Krishna's holy names in public. What I said is we should pay attention to the public so that we chant Hare Krishna in a time, place, and manner that people are comfortable with. That's all I said. But what's interesting, the fact, you see, I think what you revealed is, and I'm not knocking you, but that when you have kind of a closed society where everyone kind of thinks the same, and if you say something a little different, people get very alarmed and think you're saying something else. And so one of the problems with a closed society that's not used to open debate and discussion is that people don't develop the capacity to really hear what other people are saying. And I found this all around the world. So, for example, just to give one example, when Lord Chaitanya went out on Harinam, when he inaugurated the Sankirtan movement in Navadvip, all the indications we have in the books are that he and his followers were dressed like everybody else. No uniforms, no exotic uniforms, just like everybody else. They were normal citizens chanting Hare Krishna. And actually, I had this conviction before I joined the movement, before I even knew what the movement was. Because I had seen Prabhupada. Prabhupada came to my university. Since I have a very good friend, Giriraj Swami, and who was on the other side of the country at Brandeis University outside Boston. And Prabhupada made a college tour. He preached at different universities, and we both saw Prabhupada on that same tour in different sides of the country. But I saw Prabhupada, and that dramatically affected me. And then that summer, I went home for the summer, Southern California, and I ran into a Harinam party on Sunset Strip, Sunset Boulevard in Los Angeles. And it was Tamal Krishna and Vishnu Jana and all these really interesting devotees. And so I knew about the devotees in Berkeley, and I liked the devotees, so I was chanting. And then I actually had never been to a Hare Krishna temple, never read a book. I just knew they're authentic. I knew the devotees were real. This is real spirituality. I just knew that. And so I began, and I thought to myself, should I go and stand in the line, the chorus line with them, or stay where I am? And I remember I thought to myself, and I'm sure this intelligence came from Krishna, the thought came, it's better I stay here, because if all these people see that a normal person, someone like them, is chanting, that will encourage them to chant. So I had that realization before I even knew what ISKCON was. And so I'm not at all knocking Harinam. What I'm knocking is insensitivity, not giving a damn what the public thinks. I'm definitely knocking that. I'm knocking arrogance. I'm knocking the sense that, we don't need to care about what they think. Because if you don't care what they think, they won't care what you think. Even Krishna reciprocates. So if we simply don't care about their feelings, they won't care about ours. And frankly, if the message we're trying to give them is that God will love you more if you wear Indian clothes, or you will love God more if you, even, and the non-devotees know that's ridiculous. I hope that we at least have at least an equal understanding to the non-devotees about these things. Because if you try to convince, and Prabhupada is extremely keen to attract intelligent people, go out there in Auckland and try to convince an intelligent person that God will love you more if you wear, old-fashioned Indian clothes. Try to convince an intelligent person of that. And so, anyway, I won't go into my whole rant on this, but yes, we absolutely, it's the Yuga Dharma, we should absolutely chant, but we should care about the people we're trying to save. It's like if you have a child, you'd better care about what the child likes to eat. Of course, you have to give healthy food, but it has to be healthy food the child likes to eat. You need to care about that. And so we need to care about giving Harinam in a way that people can digest and people can identify with. Because if they just think it's some exotic thing, they may clap, they may take pictures, they'll never in a million years join us. For them, it's just a show. It's an exotic show. If you want people to identify with us and join us, you better care about what's going to make them comfortable. And I mean you chant Hare Krishna, I don't mean chant something else. What was the other thing you said? Did you say something else? Okay. Hare Krishna. So, anything else? The Peanut Gallery, here it goes.
Hare Krishna. So just to clarify on the Agata Sukriti thing, is it merely a catalyst for those who have already got the previous activities and spiritual life?
So is Agata Sukriti merely a catalyst for those who already have some spiritual activities in the past?
Is that how it acts?
I'm not saying that there's no benefit, but let me quote, for example, Krishna in the Bhagavad-gita, a verse that no one ever pays attention to, although it's extremely important. It's the last verse of chapter 17, 1728, where Krishna says, Ashadhaya hutam dattam tapastaptam kritang chajat asariti uchate partha nachatat pretya noiha. What that means is that any religious activity you perform, if you don't really believe in what you're doing, it is asat, which in Sanskrit can mean unreal or a very little benefit. And Krishna says, in this life and the next. In this life and the next. He specifically says that. Now, if you go on Harinam, you believe in it, so you're benefited. You are making spiritual advancement. If someone just walks by and they don't believe at all in it, according to what Krishna says in the Bhagavad-gita, there is very little benefit in this life or the next life. That's Krishna. So I'm not saying there's no benefit, but I believe that Agata Sukriti especially works with people who have something inside that can be awakened. Because I read that in the Bhagavad-gita, chapter 6. So again, I'm paying very close attention to Shastra and trying to figure this out. And my motive is that I want to fulfill Prabhupada's desires and I want to help save this planet. Otherwise, frankly, if this movement was really going well, this movement was really strong in the Western countries, you would not see me saying these things. I would be, at my age, in a very nice, beautiful Gaudiya Vaishnava golf community. Just writing books, having a really good time. So, because Prabhupada trained me that way. As far as I know, I'm the last active preacher in this movement who's trained personally by Prabhupada as a Western GBC. As far as I know. The last one. And Prabhupada, I know, trusted me because he said that. He trusted my intelligence. He said that repeatedly. and he confided in me many things. And therefore, I would, if I don't do everything in my power, win, lose, or draw, whatever, if I don't do everything in my power to try to restore or help, obviously I can't do it, but help to restore Prabhupada's Western mission, then I feel I would be betraying Prabhupada. Whether people like it or not, some people love what I'm saying, some people are convinced I'm the anti-Krishna. So, I'm the worst thing that ever happened since burnt dull. So, whatever, I owe it to Prabhupada. That's why I'm doing this, because I owe it to Prabhupada to try to convince you of what we need to do to become a powerful movement, to become a contender in the Western world. Yes, back there?
I'd like to say thank you for coming here and giving us your audience and sharing your experience with us. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
I have a very nice service where I travel around the world with the Harinam party. And we like to apply the ripe mango technique. The ripe mango technique is that we're chanting, and then when we see a spark of enthusiasm in a person appreciates, then we, excuse me, I can't see it. We like to approach that person and try and encourage them.
Okay, I want to repeat that. What is your name?
My name?
Yes.
Sundar Nitaidas.
And where are you from?
I'm from Ireland.
Ireland?
Yeah.
It's a great old country. So Sundar Nitaidas is part of an international, I was in Wicklow. It's part of an international Sankirtan party, and they go around the world and they use the ripe mango technique, which is just focus on the people that show some interest. Don't worry about everybody else.
No, that's not what I said. I say we chant Hare Krishna in the street to a procession, right. And when we see a spark of inspiration in their face...
I think we just said the same thing.
No, you said something different. You said we don't worry about the others. That's not part of what I was saying.
Well, what I meant was, you don't worry about it at the moment. You don't go and talk to everybody. You talk to the person that shows interest.
Yeah, because they're the one...
Which means that the extent of your worry about everyone else is just doing the Harinam.
Well, maybe I'll rephrase it.
What's that?
I can rephrase the statement, make it clearer.
Okay, but all I'm saying is that you do Harinam.
Yes.
Which you believe benefits everyone, and that if someone shows more interest, then you focus on that person.
Yeah, we approach them and say, please can you chant our name? Please can you chant?
Yeah, we're saying the same thing.
Yeah, so then that's coupled with, we understand that when someone chants the holy name, then they're chanting, correct me if I'm wrong, they're chanting Namabas, because they're not making an offense.
Yes, of course. If someone chants the holy name and doesn't know what they're doing, it's Namabas.
So that Namabas it's a tangible spiritual experience for that person.
Okay, it's tangible spiritual. Okay, I understand what you're saying, and I would like to say that I believe the right mango technique is very problematic, and I'll explain why.
Okay.
There is in fact, I think it's dangerous, which you're not supposed to say in the Hare Krishna movement, but I will, but I will give a good reason. Prabhupada said philosophy and religion together, not religion without philosophy. First of all, I appreciate, I'm sure you're a very sincere devotee, and I'm sure Krishna appreciates what you're doing. So I'm not questioning that. The problem with the right mango technique is that it is not enough to simply do Harinam for the unripe mangoes. In other words, the people who are not, at least right now, interested, but we're doing Harinam, here's the problem. That if, let's say, I do Harinam in a way that, let's say, a significant number of people find to be somewhat strange or exotic, significant, not just one or two. My experience has been most people. And yet, there's one person or maybe more who do show some interest. The problem is that the people that think that we are strange, in most cases, will make very sure that the right mango doesn't join the Hare Krishna movement. Mm-hmm. In other words, we need to neutralize the public in the literal sense. Because here's the point. If you look statistically at the number of people who show some interest in what we're doing, either they buy a book and they really want the book, or they appreciate a Harinam party, and then you say, what percentage of those people actually pursue that, come to a temple, and what percentage actually join the Hare Krishna movement? And Hare Krishna. I think it's fair to say, based on my experience around the world, it's a very small percentage. And so what's happening? If the public in general, not the ripe mangoes, the unripe mangoes, if the public in general thinks that we're a little strange or exotic or whatever, I mean, even in Gainesville, Florida, where they give out 1,000 plates of prasadam a day, where we're part of the university. I mean, we're on university T-shirts made by the university. When I taught at the university, I found many people think we're a little, many people. And so the point is that if you go, say, to buy a car, and let's say you like that car, you want that car, then you look at the price tag and you have what's called sticker shock. You can't afford it. It's too expensive. So the question here is, in order for someone to join the Hare Krishna movement, how much does it cost? What do they have to pay to join the Hare Krishna movement? And I don't just mean follow all the principles immediately. I mean just, because I think, at least hopefully, I hope that in many temples nowadays we don't just beat people over the head with the rules. Because Prabhupada, when I took sannyas in 1972 and wrote to Prabhupada saying that I was going to preach at the universities, the first thing Prabhupada wrote to me was, do not present Krishna consciousness as rules and regulations. Do not present Krishna consciousness as rules and regulations. It is the most sublime philosophy. That's why, no one would ever give a Sunday feast lecture on the four principles, right? I mean, that could never happen in the Hare Krishna movement. So what I'm saying is, it's not the four principles that are keeping people away from this movement. Because if there's a mature preacher in a temple, obviously they're just going to encourage the person, come to our classes or come to the kirtan or take prasadam. They're not going to beat them over the head with the rules. So that's not why people aren't joining. If we think people are not coming because of the four principles, we're dreaming. What's really happening, actually, is these ripe mangoes, I would say most of them, go home and tell their family, tell their friends, tell their colleagues at work, I'm interested in the Hare Krishna movement, and then guess what happens? They get an avalanche of unripe mangoes on their head. And then you get, basically, by appearing in public in a way that strikes most people as strange, we are mobilizing the public against us. And family members, friends, colleagues will do everything in their power to prevent that person from joining the Hare Krishna movement or even coming to the temple. And therefore, it becomes too expensive. Yeah, I'm interested, I like the chanting, I like this book. Am I willing to kind of have major trouble with my family and friends? Too expensive. That's what's really happening. We may tell ourselves that it's because of the principles or this or that. No. And so therefore, what I'm saying is we should do Harinam. We should do Harinam, but we should do it in a way that leaves the public neutral. So that when the ripe mango says to family or friends or colleagues at work that, yeah, I saw these Hare Krishnas interested, they're going to say, well, yeah, whatever. For example, if that same ripe mango, let's say is a ripe mango for Buddhism, and goes and tells my friends, yeah, I'm thinking of doing this meditation thing, they're going to get a very different response. So, and the reason I mentioned it, the reason I spoke initially the way I did in response to you, is because I've heard this a million times in the Hare Krishna movement. We don't care about the insincere people. We're just interested in the sincere people. Disaster. that is a recipe for disaster, because we are mobilizing, activating the whole society against us to convince interested people not to join us. And therefore it is absolutely essential to leave the general public. I mean, there are always some demons, that's not we can't help that. But we have to leave the general public at least neutral, so they're not working against us. So that's my point.
Okay, so then I have a question.
Yes?
Can you give us a practical, if you were a Sankirtan leader, Harinam leader, what would the Harinam party look like?
If I was this Harinam leader, what would the party look like? First of all, everyone would have these jackets with huge letters on the back that say Jaya Charya Dev. On the front would be a picture of me 30 years ago. Okay, now I'll give you the real answer. That was a joke, obviously. I would find a time, place, and venue. Well, that is place. A time and place and manner, because we absolutely should teach the public to chant Hare Krishna. We need to do Harinam Sankirtan. But we should find a way to do it, whether the musical style, the way we're dressed, where we choose to do it. For example, this is kind of old school ISKCON, but I don't know if it goes on anymore. But I remember once I was in a Harinam in Honolulu, in Waikiki, and it was full of tourists. It was just crowded. And so the devotees were doing Harinam on the street, and they were so ecstatic that they basically were blocking the sidewalk and forcing pedestrians into traffic. That just to keep, and they were angry as anything, because they were actually forced to walk in the street with all these cars coming by because we were taking up the sidewalk. That's an extreme case, obviously. I'm sure you don't do that, but or for example, anyway, I could give other horror stories, but I think that we should dress in a way which is decent. Because in the Bhagavad-gita, Krishna doesn't say, always think of me, dress like me, and you will come to me. And actually, Lord Chaitanya didn't. I give a simple example. In the Bhagavatam, it says that a sannyasi should either go naked or wear deerskin. So we'll vote now. Anyway, that's what and also brahmacharis, by the way. Deerskin or naked, those are the two main recommendations found throughout the Bhagavatam. Now, when Lord Chaitanya came, he's Krishna, that was no longer socially appropriate. And so therefore, Lord Chaitanya told a devotee not to wear deerskin, even though the Bhagavatam, which Lord Chaitanya said is the main scripture, repeatedly says you should wear deerskin. How did Lord Chaitanya dress? He dressed like Mayavadi sannyasis. Because it's just like, let's say if I'm teaching in a university, I have to dress like a professor. And Lord Chaitanya actually reestablished Vaishnava sannyas by giving sannyas to the 6 Goswamis. They actually reestablished Vaishnava sannyas, which had been lost. So for everyone knows that when Sanatana Goswami came to Lord Chaitanya with this sort of Gucci chadar, and Lord Chaitanya said, get rid of that, it's not appropriate, people won't respect you. Now, what's interesting is that the very thing that Bhaktisiddhanta, again, didn't follow Lord Chaitanya. Why? In terms of sannyas dress. Because he was following Lord Chaitanya in a higher sense. Because the real tradition of Gaudiya Vaishnavism is adaptation. That actually is the tradition. So if you want to follow the acharyas, you adapt. We see Lord Chaitanya rejecting the injunctions of our most important Shastra, Jiva Goswami, in his Tattva Sandarbha, which is the main epistemological book in our tradition, which means it discusses what are valid sources of knowledge. And the Bhagavatam, the Tattva Sandarbha concludes the Bhagavatam is the most important source of knowledge for us. And Lord Chaitanya and the 6 Goswamis rejected the Bhagavatam's injunctions on dress. Why? Because it's not a basic instruction, it's a detail. And the real instruction is time and place. Just like, for example, Bhishma is praised in the first canto as being Desha Kala Vibhagavit, a knower of the differences of time and place. Read Prabhupada's purport. It's an eye-opener. And then again, in Bhagavatam 4.854, Narada Muni, instructing Dhruva Maharaj, says, worship the Lord Desha Kala Vibhagavit. Understand there are differences of time and place. And Prabhupada says that people that want to do everything as it's done in India are puffed up with concocted notions. That's Prabhupada. That's a quote from Prabhupada. Puffed up with concocted notions. They think that we should do in the West what's done, everything as it's done in India. And he says we should make every adjustment so that Western people are comfortable with us. Every adjustment. Take all risk. That's Prabhupada explaining Desha Kala Vibhagavit. And we see Lord Chaitanya doing that. And then we see Bhaktisiddhanta choosing for his sannyasis a Muslim shirt. The Muslim word for shirt is kurta. And using a dhoti, which was used by the Ramakrishna Mission, who were, the Ramakrishna Mission. Why? Because it fit in at that time. And so, again, that's just one example. So, in answer to your question, I would find a way to dress. The example is given of uniform. I want to address that also. Sorry, I'll give you a chance to ask your question, but I want to address the point of uniform. Prabhupada, if you look at Prabhupada as he was preaching in India, where he attracted many very, very intelligent people, life members. the leading citizens of India, really. And they engaged in adult conversations. Prabhupada would say something, they would say, well, no, what about this or that? And they would go back and forth. Not on spiritual philosophy. On basic philosophy, Prabhupada, there was no negotiation. But on details of how to present Krishna consciousness, it went back and forth, and they would discuss and debate these points. So we should present ourselves in a way. So the uniform thing. The example, you ever heard this argument that just as a policeman or fireman has a uniform? So if you need, and so this is what I would say to Prabhupada, and I think Prabhupada would be happy that I was having an adult conversation with him, something he had trouble finding among his young disciples. I would say, first of all, in philosophy, if someone proposes an analogy, if there are significant disanalogies, then the analogy doesn't work. And I would argue, in service to Prabhupada, trying to serve him, that there are very significant disanalogies here. For example, take the firemen and policemen, say in New Zealand. For one thing, everyone in New Zealand, except sociopaths or criminals, everyone in New Zealand already accepts the firemen and the policemen. No one disputes their authority. And so all you need to know is who is a fireman, who is a policeman. Now, does this analogy carry over? Does everyone in New Zealand already accept that the Hare Krishnas are the ultimate authorities on a good, happy life and on God? What percentage of people in New Zealand are absolutely convinced that we are the authorities? Yeah, it's very small. So that's a very significant disanalogy. Because a uniform works when people already accept the person and just need to know who it is. Another disanalogy is that if you look at how policemen or firemen in New Zealand, what their uniforms look like, they are carefully tailored to convey authority within the culture of this country. And that's why police and firemen uniforms are certain colors, because those are military colors, and those are colors which are sort of convey authority within our culture. And so, again, uniforms are very valuable when a group of people are already accepted as authority, and the uniform is done in such a way that reinforces that conviction that these people are authorities. So since none of those things are the case with the Hare Krishna movement in New Zealand, I don't think the analogy works. And so in answer to your question, I would think, actually, and find a way to do Harinam. Harinam, chant Hare Krishna. But do it in a way that makes people comfortable, does not give them the impression that we are radically different from them, so that we just attract people who are counterculture, people who, don't want to be part of mainstream society, and so they identify with us because we're not part of society. We need to attract normal people also. Yes?
I have a doubt about this.
Go ahead.
Because, right, what you're saying is you're saying that we're going to change. You're going to have a new Harinam manifesto, a new Harinam presentation. But as Mataji pointed out, Srila Prabhupada, when he was sending the disciples, the three couples, he took them aside. It says in Mukunda Maharaj's book, he took them aside and he specifically trained them how to dance, how to play the instruments. He trained them up and they practiced inside how to do Harinam. And then he told them the story of was it Charlie Chaplin?
Yeah, I know the story, Charlie Chaplin.
The coattails, right?
Yes.
And he said that by starting this new trend, people will think this is a new thing and they'll catch on.
However, again, I think Prabhupada at this point in history needs us to be adults and not just follow like little children without thinking. And the fact is, number one, the trend did not catch on, so it's not like the Charlie Chaplin movie. Prabhupada made many predictions, many statements that didn't actually happen, such as he said, for example, there would be a war, decades ago between the Soviet Union and the United States, and that didn't happen. Prabhupada said Balavan would be president of the United States in 15 years. He never did. And so again, it doesn't mean Prabhupada is not a pure devotee. It doesn't mean Prabhupada is not a fully qualified founder acharya. If you actually look at Prabhupada's own statements, he says over and over and over again that if you think a pure devotee is materially infallible or omniscient, you don't understand what a pure devotee is. And so Prabhupada repeatedly said that I'm not materially omniscient or infallible, and I can give you so many cases where Prabhupada very enthusiastically urged us to do something, said it would bring certain results, and the results were very different, and therefore Prabhupada adjusted the program. So as far as Mukunda, here's something else you should keep in mind. Prabhupada basically preached in the West for 10 years, which was 1966 when he registered ISKCON, finally got out of Butler, Pennsylvania. So 1966 up until 1976, his last tour of the West. During those 10 years, there was an extraordinary, unprecedented interest in Indian mysticism and gurus. And so Prabhupada never actually saw the Western world under normal circumstances, when people, in fact, are not interested in Indian things. And so the point is, Prabhupada told Mukunda and the others to do that because it was working. It was working. We were making lots of devotees. The movement was exploding. So if you're, let's say, in a cricket team and you're winning, why would you change your strategy? If Prabhupada came now, it would be ludicrous if you actually understand Prabhupada's life and how he never, ever continued doing something that wasn't working. Whether it was Jhansi, whether it was the Back to Godhead sheet in Delhi, whether it was Butler, Pennsylvania, whether it was staying with Dr. Mishra, Prabhupada never kept doing something that wasn't working. And if he came back now and, frankly, could hardly recognize his temples, I think, based on the way they were when he left them, and so everything was dramatically changed, a booming, exploding Western Hare Krishna movement was just sort of a remnant of what it had been. To think that Prabhupada would say, well, just keep doing the same thing, I believe is absurd. Anyone that says that Prabhupada would see the current state of the Western movement and say, don't change anything, I think that hasn't really studied seriously Prabhupada's life. And here's a quote from Prabhupada. Here's a direct quote from Prabhupada. We do not care about dress. Dress is a dead thing. We are interested in living consciousness. Prabhupada personally told me in Honolulu that you don't have to wear Indian clothes. Here's a quote from Veda Base. I think it's Rameshwar asked Prabhupada, this is in Veda Base, look it up. Why do we wear Indian clothes? And Prabhupada said, because, he said, I never said you had to do it, you wanted to do it. So I want to keep Prabhupada in the center of ISKCON, but I want all of Prabhupada. I don't want an edited Prabhupada, a censored Prabhupada, a filtered Prabhupada. I want all of Prabhupada. And so if you look at all of Prabhupada's instructions, it's obvious that where it works, in cases where it really works and the movement's spreading and growing, Prabhupada liked Indian culture. And he was totally open, enthusiastically open to doing it a different way if necessary. For example, when Prabhupada sent Tamal Krishna to China, because of the legal situation, political situation there, Tamal Krishna cut off his shika, let his hair grow a little bit. I'm not saying we should do that, and he achieved a miracle, really. I mean, he had an extraordinary achievement in the sense of spreading Krishna consciousness in China. And Prabhupada loved it. Prabhupada absolutely loved it. He was ecstatic about it, knowing that Tamal Krishna had changed all these external details. Now, I can easily prove that although there were, let's say, legal obstacles in China, that cultural obstacles can be much more difficult. For example, I can point out, I don't want to offend anyone, but certain Western countries in Western Europe, or even in the United States, where it's a disaster in terms of Western preaching. And China has literally hundreds and hundreds of times more devotees. Even though there are still legal obstacles in China and no legal obstacles in the West, but cultural obstacles. So Prabhupada enthusiastically cheered on Tamal Krishna when he got the job done and did not break any principles. Rupa Goswami says in chapter 6 of the Nectar of Devotion that there are basic principles you cannot change and there are details you can. If you mix these two, you're not a spiritual scientist. If you mix these two. And something does not become a basic principle of Bhakti Yoga because Prabhupada one time said he liked it, even though 100 times said it didn't matter. That doesn't make it, that doesn't shift it into the basic principle box. So you can read that. So, it's just like, for example, let's say you have some kind of medical problem, and let's say there is actually a known cure for your problem. But if you can't find a doctor, it won't help. So Prabhupada gave us a spiritual science, but we need to be spiritual scientists. Prabhupada gave us Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. Prabhupada says in the Bhagavatam, make all adjustments so that Western people feel comfortable with Krishna consciousness. That's Prabhupada. So it's getting a little late. I'm sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
First of all, you said causes mercy. The word ahitiki.
Yes.
What does it mean, Maharaj? Does that cause us mercy? Ahitiki up there?
Yes, the word ahituki, though, is not used with the word mercy. The word ahituki, no, but I'll explain what the word means. The Sanskrit word hetu, it comes from the Sanskrit word hetu, which means a cause. It can also mean a psychological cause, which is a motive. That's what a motive is. It's a psychological cause. So the word haituka means it has a motive. It has some motive. No, just wait a second. We'll get there. Just wait a second. Just wait a second and we'll get there. Thank you. So the word ahaituki is used with bhakti, and therefore ahaituki bhakti, what the Bhagavatam says is that if you render devotional service to Krishna without material motivation, that will quickly produce the result. That's how the word is used. Now,
next one is, when I chant the Hare Krishna mantra, someone chants the Hare Krishna mantra, whether we're initiated or not, do we not become all suspicious? In other words, what I'm trying to say is, when we have these young men out chanting,
yes.
and we're out chanting, I would like to invite you out on Wednesday or Friday night and see the incredible response we get from the public in New Zealand, right across the board. And we are accepted here. Now, when we chant, doesn't that change that cause? Don't we get a when we just chant Hare Krishna? In other words, what I'm saying is, yes, intellectually I can understand what you're talking about. But realistically, when I chant and I get other people to chant, we make devotees. They might stay necessarily.
Okay.
Choice. But it creates auspiciousness. It creates devotion.
But when you get people to chant, and people understand that they're chanting a spiritual sound vibration, then that's not agyata. The extent to which, by your association, they want to chant Hare Krishna, knowing that, it's like Rupa Goswami says, adosha dhan, beginning a little bit of faith, tatak sadhu sangha. So the extent to which they have faith in you, or they appreciate you, it's not agyata, it's gyata. And ultimately, so I'm talking about people that don't want to chant with you. Ultimately, when I used to come into Prabhupada's room, and I was at GBC in Latin America, I remember one time I came in, he just immediately said, like, how many devotees, how many new temples. So I think ultimately you say we're accepted in New Zealand. People don't try to beat us up anymore in the street like in the early days or something. I mean, we are accepted. People may appreciate us, but people appreciate many things they have no interest in joining. So, for example, people pay a lot of money to see different, like say, programs, shows. There's a famous program which is, they say, 5,000 years of Chinese culture, where they have song and dance, and people deeply appreciate it as a cultural presentation, probably even has wisdom in it, and they pay a lot of money to go see it, and they praise it, but they're not going to move to China. And so, according to history, if you study history, and if you study, the social science of religion, the kind of acceptance we need, ultimately, is that people join us. And so the number of intelligent people, Prabhupada is also very concerned with attracting intelligent people. So the number of intelligent people that have some ability to really help this movement in society, the number of those people who join us is very significant. It's very, very significant. And that's what Prabhupada wanted. He wanted to change the world, not merely be accepted in the sense that people think we're nice, we're all right, we're fun, they like us, but actually change. He wanted to change New Zealand, he wanted to change America, he wanted to establish Krishna consciousness as a powerful spiritual force that would change these countries. And so that's what I'm looking at. I appreciate your service, I'm sure you're doing a lot of good, I don't doubt that, but that's what I'm focused on, because that's the way Prabhupada trained me. Thank you. Yes?
Is there a word in Sanskrit meaning mercy?
Yeah, of course. Kripa, Anukampa, Karuna, many more words. Yeah, there are many words for mercy, actually. Yes?
You were mentioning why the Bhagavad-gita mentions that if someone has fallen from their spiritual practice, when someone's fallen from their spiritual practice, they can begin again, usually when they're in a wealthy or kind of cultured family. Does that mean that we should be focusing on reaching out to people in wealthy families and those that are more cultured, because there's a better chance that you'll find people who are in that position of restarting their spiritual life?
I think we should just reach out and just, try to, I don't think we can just focus on rich people, but we should reach out. So it's a little late, actually. I'm afraid so maybe we'll stop here. Anyway, thank you for being good sports. I hope I didn't offend anyone. I'm just trying my best. Hare Krishna.
And there'll be Harinam tomorrow and Dodi and Kurta. You can just forget everything he said, because Prabhupada made the temple president the power of the temple. And we got Rath Yatra tomorrow night. You can wear your kami clothes. It is accepted. But we'd like a few Dodis and Kurtas. Maharaj is fantastic. We really appreciate him being here. It's good for the intellect, it's good for our intelligence. And he's going to give class for more nectar on Sunday. So turn up Sunday for some more Sunday morning. Yeah. Thank you, Maharaj. Nectar. You're in so much trouble, mate. I want you to come to my office. Jai.